Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Julie. Are you trying to get ahead on your Christmas projects? If so, this is the perfect workshop for you. Let's take a look at this workshop together. This workshop was completed using the Season of Green and Gold suite from Stampin' Up. It is an exclusive online order, so you don't want to miss it. And I did bring in the Round We Go die set. You can see it right here on these pages. I just thought it was so much fun and I wanted to incorporate it in this workshop. Let's take a closer look at layout number 1. You'll see that you've got a couple different sizes here in the pinwheels. I'll show you that in a second. We've got some gold splatters on this page. We've got a great little title here. And it continues on to this side right here, 2024. I really like these pinwheels. Now for this one here, it is a little bit bigger. If you've noticed, these ones here, when you create them as is, they are 3 inches. This one is 4 inches across. Let's take a look on how that came together. Did you know that you can make bigger pinwheels from that same set? This one here is slightly bigger than this one right here. So we're going to go over some of the details because some of them are quite important. So if you're following along in the assembly guide, you will see that you've got your plaid paper here. And there is a note that says, make sure to align your die because this is a repeating pattern. Now, if you want to have all of your line continuous, you really do have to pay attention to that. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to pick a lane, I guess. And I decided that I was going to use the flap at the top. I'm going to line it up with this first green line and this thick one right here. And when I place my die, the scallops are right at the edge. Whatever you decide to do for the first one, you have to repeat for all 3. For the larger pinwheel, you need 3 pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to die cut here. And then I'm going to move it over. I'm going to line it up on that same line. And I'm going to line it up right here at the green, the dark green line. And I'm going to repeat that 3 times. Let me go cut these and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, let's take a look at how I've cut these. Definitely washi tape is going to be your friend. And if I place them on my mat here, you can see that all of my scallops are lined up with this green edge and they're all right here at the top. Do you see that? They are all the same. And that is important if you want to keep this pattern going on this pinwheel. Let's start with the folding. So I've got my first one here that is folded and you've got that pretty pattern at the back. And you have to make sure that you're folding in the same way. So in this case, my little tab is folded up. It goes up. So I'm going to do that for all 3 pieces. So here we have our 3 pieces to create our bigger pinwheel. Let me bring that back into frame. So it is slightly bigger than this one. And we'll talk about these pieces in a moment. Let's just put our pinwheel together. And I'm going to add a little bit of glue on this edge. I'm going to line these 2 up. So you can see that my pattern is pretty good. It's got the continuous line. So that's what I'm looking for. We're going to do this one here. You can see that this is a very long piece and I'm going to close it off. I'm going to add a little bit of glue here. And then we're going to let it sit for a bit and we will do the center. So I'm kind of moving it around so that the pattern is lining up. And then I'm just recreasing it. So you can see that this is much bigger. I'm going to let that dry. And then we're going to do the topper. So the topper is made out of a few pieces. This is the scallop circle. This is the one with the pointy edges. And then this little guy here If you want to use it, it is part of this collection, and you have tiny little berries that you can cut out of this sheet right here. Do you see them? They're all over the pattern. It is tedious. Now, if you don't want to cut all of those little pieces, you could always use these really pretty little gems right here. But I decided to give it a try, and they're not that bad. There's a few in here, so you can see that in this set you have 1, 2, 3. So you just have to take your time and put them together. Now, for the top piece, I've got the one with the pointy edges and the one with the rounded edges. We're going to attach these together, and we're just going to flip that in here, and you'll see that I'm repeating this for a lot of them. I found that this to me looked like a snowflake, but if you don't have snow in your area, it doesn't look like a snowflake, but to me it looks like a snowflake. So for here, I am going to attach to the vellum piece. And the reason why, if I just added this on top, it's fine, but it needed a little bit of dressing up. I'm going to add a little bit more glue. I'm going to pop that right in the middle of my piece, and then I can add some glue right at the back, and we can add that to the center of this foil piece. So there we have our topper, if you want. So I'm going to set that to the side. These are all of the pieces that I've used to create this one here. And I've got my little piece here. Let me just glue that down before I lose it. So we're just going to add a tiny little bit of glue, and we're going to pop that in right in the center. Now that's pretty good. So now for the fun part, you just have to make sure that your creases on your folds where you connected are going in the right direction. And you're going to collapse this piece down. And it is a bigger piece, but it's actually, I found it easier. It doesn't pop up as much. You can see that it goes down really nicely. I'm going to work from the back side, so you kind of get a feel for, if you want to change this to this look, you could absolutely use the back side instead of the plaid. I just preferred the plaid personally. Now we are going to use, again, a big piece. So this one right here is just done with the French vanilla. And I am going to add a generous amount of glue. I'm going to work from the back side. I'm going to pop this down. And I'm going to use my mat here to make sure that this is like a 4-inch. Do you see how you kind of have to push it into place? And this is where having a crafty friend with you would really work out nicely. But I'm going to hold it down. And because I'm using the Tombow glue, I can manipulate this piece. Now, I did put some glue in the center. I really don't need it in the center. I just need it on the outer edges. So let me just pop that here. And I'm just pushing my piece in place. And it is important, again, because you have a pattern, if you don't push it in place, it's going to look a little strange. So I'm just really trying to manipulate this piece so that it looks the way it should. So I'm staying within the lines of the 4-inch. I'm going to move that up. It looks pretty good from this side. So I'm going to add a block on it. And I'm going to let that dry. And then we're going to put this one right on top. So when your block is on it, you can further push that in to make sure that it is within the 4-inch marks. And it's going to create a perfect circle, and it's going to be really good for the pattern. Okay, let's flip that over. And you see that I didn't need to put glue on the inside. What's important is the outer edges. I'm just going to position this to make sure that my pattern follows everything that it's supposed to follow. And we're going to add a generous amount of glue on the outer edge. That's where you want the glue, right here. And I'm going to pop that right in the center. And you can see that it's following this green pattern. So I can kind of manipulate that further. Push that in. And I'm really looking at my pattern. And I think that that looks pretty good. You can see that you've got your continuous pattern on this one here. I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to add it to my layout. You can see that by adding one more strip to that pinwheel, you can make this a different size, and I thought that that was a lot of fun. Let's move on to layout number 2. For layout number 2, I've got, again, the beautiful colors from this paper collection. In this collection, you have a few sheets that you can actually use some of these dies to die cut some of these elements. Do you see that? This particular sheet here, you can cut all of the images. You've got this one here, and then you have these tiny, tiny little berries. Let me see if I can grab one here for you. And they cut them as well. So I was able to complete this workshop by cutting some of these elements out of this sheet. I only cut one sheet because you can see I still have a complete sheet. And I really enjoy that the dies match the paper. They also match the vellum paper. So this is a really cool feature of these dies with this paper collection. Let's take a look at these pinwheels right here, and I'll show you how these ones come together. These are the standard size, and they were done out of cardstock. You can make them out of cardstock. It's just a little bit more rigid, but it's tons of fun. And here you see those die cuts. Aren't they pretty? I cut those out with those dies, and I just added them to my pinwheel, and it really accentuated this layout. Now I will show you how to make this pinwheel right here. I'll also show you how to make these cute little bows right here with a fail-proof technique. Well, at least I think so. Let's take a look at behind the scenes on how to create some of these elements. Now, when you're creating your pinwheels, you're going to cut 2 of each. These ones here are cut out of French vanilla, but if you're using Stampin' Up, this is very vanilla. And when it's cardstock, it's a little bit stiffer and a little bit harder to do, but it is completely achievable. So I like to kind of accordion fold all of them, and I'm going to stretch them out here just for you to see one thing that is very, very important. Ask me how I know. Do you see how all of my tabs are in the same direction? The accordion fold has to be continuous. We're going to join 2 together for these pinwheels right here. So I'm just going to take out some glue, and we're going to add that to the tab. And I'm just adding a little bit. This glue is very, very strong. So I like to kind of spread them out a little bit and make sure that they're on nice and straight. There is a fold, so you don't want to go over the fold. Hopefully you can see that. I'm just going to push that in. I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to do that for all 3 of them. So again, I kind of stretch them out a tiny little bit, and then I just go right on the crease line or the fold line. Just like that. Kind of make sure that everything is nice and lined up. For the next step, you want to close off the circle. Do you see how it makes a difference if your tabs are all in the same direction? So I'm going to add a little bit of glue, and I'm going to close that off. And I'm going to make sure that it's lining up and press that in. I'm adding the glue on the top of the flap in this case. And then I'm completing the circle. And I'm pushing that in to make sure it's all the way in and it's equal this way. All right, let's collapse our little pinwheels and let's glue them together. Now, I've seen some people use this little dot here and collapse that in. Let me just put that down and then just add a little dot. I have not been successful doing it that way. For me, what I found worked really, really well, especially when you're using the Tombow glue, is to use the larger circle with the pointy edges because you have a lot of contact points. So I'm going to add some glue onto this piece right here. And this glue is really good for that. I found that it worked quite well. So you can see that I'm being quite generous. And if I pop this down, this is the front side. So I want to move that to the other side, and I want to go from the back side. You know you're on the back side when you can see your little flaps that you've glued together. So I'm going to hold that in place. I'm going to take my circle and I'm going to pop that in here. But you can kind of push it into place. You can kind of squeeze that in. And then I just add a block on it and I let it dry. So while all of my pinwheels are drying, I'm going to do the top portion, which these are cut out of foil. So I have one of each, one with the pointy ends and one with the circular ends. And they do fit inside each other. So I recommend putting just a little daub of glue, like not a big one, because you don't want it to ooze on the foil. And then you just push it in. And it should fall into place. See that? And it creates a really pretty starburst. So we should be ready to decorate our pinwheels. I'm going to flip those over. We're going to pop that right in the center. And I think that that looks good when we put it on our layout. I think I'm going to further embellish these with these really cute, they're called Cherry Cobbler and Pearls. And the pearls are iridescent. They look really, really good. So I like that they're already 3 together. We're going to pop that right in the center. Now, it's a small detail, but it definitely adds to the pinwheel. I wanted to quickly show you how to make these cute little bows right here. And this is a pretty fail-proof technique if you want. It is not difficult at all. I'm using DMC floss. It's gold. It's the thick one. There's thin and thick. I'm using the thicker one. And then I'm going to cut myself a piece at 5 inches. You can be as generous or as frugal as you want. I find that this is just enough for me to tie a knot. And then I'm going to take my ruler. I found that the width is perfect. So I start at one end with a tail and I go 1, 2, 3. And then I have a tail at the other end. I'm going to put this down right here. Then I just grab my glue dot. So I've got a glue dot. I'm going to put that right here on my surface. This is my craft surface, so I don't mind. The fact that it's not a perfect dot is actually what I want. I'm going to run this piece across the glue dot. I think you can see where I'm going with this. I'm going to pick up my ruler. I'm going to pull my loops off the ruler right here. I'm going to pinch them in the center, and then I'm going to drop them across that glue dot, which will hold it in place while I tie my knot. So let's just tie the knot very nice and tight. So I do a double knot for good measure, and then I pop it off. I already have my glue dot, which I need. And then it's just a matter of kind of placing it, folding this back. So all my little tails are going down. I'm going to trim them off. I'm going to bring back my layout. Now I already have my glue dot. Just going to fluff that out just a little bit. And I'm going to put it right on top of my tag. And just like that, you have the perfect little bow. You can see that these pinwheels come together really easily, and those little bows, super easy to make, right? Here you'll notice that I have my title, and this is a die from Close to My Heart. This one here is Stampin' Up. It is the mini alphabet, and I did line this up on a piece of vellum so that I can move it if I want to, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Let's take a look at layout number 3. Layout number 3 is a completely different look. This is a New Year's layout, and I love the way that this came together. Again, I'm using all of the same elements, but here I'm using the vellum pieces that are cut out from those dies that I showed you earlier. And I made these cute pinwheels here with the vellum. Now, this is a little bit tricky, but I'll show you that in a moment. I did bring in this awesome embossing folder just to really accentuate the circles and the layout. The layout is a New Year's layout, and it is very festive. You'll see here that I have 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year. This here is done with the alphabet a la mode, and this one here is another alphabet from Close to My Heart. And I want to show you something. See this? This is not really tacked down. It's tacked down on this piece of vellum, but it's very loosely tacked down on my layout. If you've been here before, you've seen me deconstruct some of my layouts to fit in photos that were not exactly the way that this was originally designed. And for that, I've learned now to put my titles on vellum, not tack them down too tight, and I'm giving myself options. The reason why I don't always have photos is that I'm trying to get these gorgeous workshops out on time for people to get ready for Christmas. And like you, I'm not ready. These, hopefully, I'll think of photos to put in here. And if not, I know these are lightly tacked down and I can move them just the way I want. Now let's take a look on how the pinwheels came together very quickly. And by this time, if you're thinking, I don't want to do pinwheels, that seems like a lot of work, hang on tight and I'll show you an alternate that you can do and still achieve a similar look. Let's look at how to put this pinwheel together. It's so pretty and dainty, but you know what? The vellum paper is probably the trickiest one to put together. Vellum tends to crack when you emboss it. It didn't crack, I didn't spray it, but I will spray it right now so that I can fold it. And I'll show you, I'm giving it a good amount of water. And I found for the vellum in particular, I'm going to line up my points. It kind of went a little off kilter when I was holding it in my hand. And you know what they say, if you start crooked, there's a lot of water here. If you start crooked, it's going to end up crooked. So we're going to go nice and slow for this one. And I'm really making sure that I'm lining up the pointed edge. And by the time I'm done folding this, it will have dried. It dries very quickly. What I like about this vellum in particular, because there's a pattern to it, it is forgiving. And you'll see when we do the glue that even though it is vellum, we can hide the glue very well. So I think I might have put a little bit too much water because it's really sticking. So I would recommend, like I did 2 sprays on both sides. I would probably recommend 1. You know, you kind of like spray it and go down. That should be plenty. But it doesn't fold back and forth as easy as when you're doing it with the designer series papers. Like that's probably the perfect thickness for that. So here it is, it's all done. And I'm going to kind of fan it out. Again, I'm doing this to prevent cracking, because if I let it dry closed and then I try and open it, it might crack. So here's the first one. So when you start with your other piece, you have to be mindful that whichever way you started, so this one I folded back, you are going in the same direction. And I really do find that by adding a bit of water, so I added a little bit too much of water, I would say do 1 pump on each side, and that is plenty. And then you just go and you fold. I was folding crooked when I was holding it in my hand, and I found that when I was paying a little bit more attention and making sure that my points were lining up, I got a really cute pinwheel in the end. So do you see how it really sticks together? So you really have to open it up. So I'm just gently pulling on my crease lines. And I'm going to show you how to do the top. So this is the top here, and I think that it looks really cute. We're going to use 2 of these. And I just want to have a little tiny bit in the center, and then you're just going to rotate that into place, and it usually falls right into place, just like so. Do you see how they kind of nestle into one another? And this is when you start having a little bit of glue on your fingers. And then to further accentuate this piece, I am going to add a little bit more glue in the center, and I'm going to place that right in the center. So we're going to pop that into place, and you'll see that this one here needs a little bit more convincing. Because of the vellum, it is quite rigid, but it will eventually fall into place. You just have to be a little bit more patient with this one, but you can see that it's looking good. So I am going to add, I use the Barely Art glue to glue these pieces down. It does dry clear, completely clear, and it holds it together nicely. So you can see here that I'm going into a circular pattern just in case it shows, but it really doesn't show. You just have to let it dry. So again, I'm looking for that flap. I want to make sure I'm on the right side. I'm going to push that together, and I am going to cover my little pinwheel, and then I'm just going to push it into place gently without breaking the scallops. By this time, you're probably more comfortable creating these little pinwheels, and I'm going to just pop this on top. I'm going to let it dry, and once it dries, I'm going to flip it over. So you can see here I've got my piece of vellum at the back, and then I have the decorated front. You have to make sure to kind of fan out all of your little scallops, because they tend to, when you push it together, they tend to bend. But other than that, I think it's going to be a really nice add to this layout. So let's get back to the layout, and we'll add our pinwheels. There you have the 3 double layouts for this workshop. Let's bring them all in. I really do like these vellum ones right here. They're a little bit tricky to put together. I did have to water them so that they didn't crack or break, but I love the way this layout came together. Let's bring back layout number 2. So layout number 2 are done out of just plain old cardstock. Those are easy to make. The cardstock makes it a little bit more rigid, but other than that, the pinwheels come together beautifully. Let's bring back layout number 1, and I'm going to show you an alternate that you can use if, you know what, pinwheels are just not your jam. You don't want to do this. Here you have the pinwheel, the way that I designed it for this layout, and you can also use the back side. If you prefer to have something that's a little bit more colorful, these look great on the other side as well. But for me, I decided to go a little bit more traditional if you want, and I used the plaid. Now again, you're thinking, yeah, I don't like the pinwheels. They add bulk. They definitely will add some bulk to your scrapbook. And if you don't want to sit around and fuss with those, my recommendation would be to use the Spotlight on Nature dies, and these are really, really awesome. You get 12 dies, so this is on both sides right here, and each of the circles are different. There's a different pattern within the circle. So what you need to do is you need to find the matching size, and of course it's the big one right here, which is 4" for this one in particular, and you can definitely cut them all out using different variation of these dies right here, and then you can add them to your layout. Now it's not exactly the same look, but it's pretty darn close. So this is an alternate if you don't like to do pinwheels, but you know what? Once you start making it, you're not going to want to stop. I really hope that you enjoyed this workshop. I will link all of the information in the description box so you can grab your very own. As always, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.